We are live with part 3 of episode 8. We are going to finish covering Cyrus the Great. Johnny, not much has changed in the past hour, but how are you doing?
I'm still plugging along, brother. Doing pretty good still.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Just let me get everything shared and out to the public. I doubt we'll have as
We're
much
getting
of
started. We're getting our shit together. We're going to expand our audience from 1 to 2 in a minute here, folks. We got Dan's boyfriend and my aunt are about to be tuned in to find out what the fuck we got to say about Cyrus the Great.
I think Carter is asleep.
Oh, wow. What a loser.
Right? Sleepy baby.
Carter is missing my slow descent into becoming Larry King.
Well, man, if you lose any more,
I was eyeballing some suspenders the other day.
Oh, all right.
I'm like, so tell me, Cyrus, when you conquered these lands, how did your second wife feel about this?
So, where we left off, Cyrus was killed, and then his body was just brutally desecrated, which I don't think he deserved, but hey, whatever. Power, you know.
It is what it is.
I doubt that's where the phrase "hell hath no word," fury like a woman scorned. But hey, you know what can you do? So we are going to discuss.
Though, I don't want to turn this into.
Go ahead.
I don't want to turn this into a gender thing because who has, come across a dead body and just ripped it to shreds. I mean, we're all human.
Right. So we're going to discuss a couple of battles between the Neo-Babylonian Empire and the Lydian Empire that we mentioned in episode 2. Then we're going to talk about the burial of Cyrus the Great, and then just basically his overall legacy, conclude this episode. Then I'm going to burn the midnight oil and get everything uploaded to Anchor tonight. So the people that don't watch us on Facebook, yeah, just have part 1, 2, and 3 already up there.
Guys, we're growing. We're learning as we go.
Oh, man, just the fire to get everything out there is coming back. So, all right.
I love it.
We are going to discuss the Battle of Office, which we're going to discuss these out of place, but whatever. What are you going to do? It's supposedly fought between September 25th to September 28th, 59 BC. This is in Opus, Babylonia.
That's extremely accurate.
Everything I have has a question mark on it, so don't take it as that.
Okay.
So it was a major engagement between the armies of Persia under Cyrus and the Neo-Babylonian Empire under Nabonidus during the Persian invasion of Mesopotamia. At the time, Babylonia was the last major power in Western Asia that was not yet under Persian control. The battle was fought in and near the strategic riverside city of Opus, north of the capital Babylon. It resulted in a decisive victory for the Persians. A few days later, the city of Cyprus surrendered to the Persians, and Cyrus's force entered Babylon apparently without a fight. Cyrus was subsequently proclaimed king, and its subject territories, thus ending the independence of Babylon, incorporating the Babylonian Empire into the Persian Empire.
It's simple enough.
So the battle, the site of the battle was at the city of Opus near the Tigris River. located about 50 miles north of modern Baghdad. The city is thought to have been a preferred point to cross the river. Um, a bridge was described there. The timing of the invasion may have been determined by the ebb of the Mesopotamian rivers, which was at their lowest levels and therefore easiest to cross. The city was a considerable strategic importance apart from the river crossing. It was at one end of the Median Wall, a fortified defensive barrier north of Babylon that had been built several decades earlier. Control office would have enabled Cyrus to break through the wall and open the road to the capital. So the battle itself, records, the so this all came from the Nabonidus Chronicle. It records that the battle took place in the month of Tasrutu, which is 27th September to 27th October, um, on the bank
Oh
of
yeah,
the Tigris.
everybody knows.
Very little
Well,
is
wouldn't that
known.
be technically we're recording on the anniversary of that?
Holy shit! Yes, we are. Very little is
What
known.
is it? 2,450 years later, something
Basically,
like
yes.
that.
The Chronicle does not provide
Boom, we are
any
relevant
details
as fuck.
of the battle's course, the disposition of the force on either side, or the casualties inflicted. The Persian army under Cyrus fought the army of Akkad, meaning the Babylonians in general, not the city of that name. The identity of the Babylonian commander is not recorded, but has traditionally been assumed that Belshazzar, the son of Nabonidus, was in command. His fate is unclear, and he may have been killed in the battle. The outcome of the battle was clearly a defeat, possibly a rout, as the defeated Babylonian army is not mentioned again in the Chronicles. So basically, the Babylonian army was destroyed here. Um, the Persian forces took plunder from the defeated Babylonians. Most translations of the Chronicle also referred to a massacre of the people of Akkad, though translators disagreed on which side was responsible and who was killed, uh, meaning the population of the city or the retreating army. So nobody knows who. Uh, yeah, the victory is followed by immense haul of booty and booty and the massacre of those who attempted to resist. Indeed, on one reading of the text, Akkad broke out into open revolt, and the last military achievement was the slaughter of the rebels. Um, so a lot of confusion here. Uh, the
It
aftermath of
seems
the
like it.
battle uh, appears to have ended any serious resistance to the Persian invasion. So this was basically the Babylonian last stand. The ancient Greeks' account of Cyrus's
Okay.
campaign in the fall of Babylon differs significantly from cuneiform accounts. Cuneiform is the ancient writing of Mesopotamia. It's just, if you look at it, just Google like cuneiform. It looks really cool. It's just like lines all put together. I know that is the modern alphabet, but it looks really cool. It's hard to describe. Um, the two ancient Greek sources for the campaign, Herodotus and Zophanan, present broadly similar versions of event. So Cyrus marched to Babylon along the side of the Diyala River, past Opis, and through the battle where the Persians fought. Cyrus subsequently laid siege to Babylon, ordering his troops to dig a canal to drain off part of the Euphrates to enable his troops to penetrate the city to weak points and its defenses. So
That's clever.
right. So this is the Battle of Opis during his conquest of the Babylonian people. So now let's just go through everything with the Babylonians.
All right.
That's really,
Is that modern day Iraq?
yes.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna talk about a couple of his conflicts with the Lydians. Um, so the Battle of Patara or Pteria, ancient Greek, I can in 547 BC, the Persian forces of Cyrus fought a drawn battle with the invading forces of Croesus, who we mentioned in part two, forcing Croesus to withdraw back into his own kingdom.
I'm glad you went
So
over some of these battles because the way you described his overtaking of other countries, it seemed very peaceful for the most part, but I guess it was peaceful in comparison to other rulers.
it's basically like the aftermath of the battles, the aftermath of these wars is more peaceful than really anybody else. So Croesus may have intended reinstating his brother-in-law Astyages on the Median throne. It's also possible that he's trying to preempt a Persian invasion of Lydia. So basically, this happens right after Cyrus overthrows his grandfather. Uh, the
Oh,
battle, yeah, the battle itself. Croesus began the campaign with invasion, crossing the Halys and capturing Pteria, then the capital and district, and formidable as a fortress. The city was sacked and the inhabitants were enslaved. Cyrus advanced to halt the invasion, and the armies met in the vicinity of the fallen city. The battles appear to have been fierce but indecisive. Both sides sustained considerable casualties in the aftermath. The outnumbered Croesus withdrew across the river. The retreat is represented by Herodotus as a strategic decision to suspend operations until their armies were more evenly matched by the arrival of reinforcements from his allies, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, and particularly the Spartans. Those losses were more or less equal. Croesus apparently thought he had inflicted sufficiently heavy losses on the Persians to cripple Cyrus for the winter, and as he disbanded his army shortly after reaching his own territory. Among historians, the outcome
that's
of the
where he made a
battle,
mistake, eh?
oh yeah, as we're going to later discuss, historians debate the outcome of the battle. Before all this and prior to his invasion, Croesus asked the Oracle of Delphi for advice. The Oracle suggested vaguely that if the king crosses the river, a great empire will be destroyed. Croesus received these words with delight, instigating a war that would ironically eventually end not the Persian Empire but his own. The dispersal of the army exposed his kingdom to the unexpected invasion of Cyrus, who followed almost immediately on his footsteps, pursuing him to Sardis. The rival kings fought again at the Battle of Tambera before Sardis, which ended in a decisive victory for Cyrus.
So his tenacity won him that one.
Right.
He stayed
So
on
now,
grass.
so now we're going to talk about the Battle of Thymbra, Thymbra. Let's see.
Okay.
So the battle was a decisive battle in the war between Croesus and Cyrus. Cyrus had pursued Croesus into his kingdom following the battle of Pteria, met the remains of Croesus' partly disbanded army in battle on the plains north of Sardis in December 547 BC. Even though the army was reinforced with many new men, Cyrus utterly defeated it.
Okay, he just ran
Despite
through it.
being, despite being outnumbered more or less 2-1, this proved decisive, and after the 14-day siege of Sardis, the city and possibly its king fell, and Lydia was conquered by the Persians. So the battle itself, um, Cyrus deployed his troops with flanks withdrawn in square formation. The flanks were covered by chariots, cavalry, and the infantry. Cyrus also used baggage camels to create a barrier around his archers. The smell of the
Oh, that's so
camels,
cool.
the smell of the camels disrupted the Lydian horses and scattered their cavalry charge as the archers fired upon them. As Cyrus expected, the wings of the army wheeled inward to envelop its novel formation. As the flanks swung in, gaps appeared at the hinges of the wheeling. Disorder was increased by the effective overhead fire of the Persian archers and mobile towers stationed within the square. Cyrus then gave the order to attack, his flank units smashing into Croesus' disorganized wings. Not long after, the Lydian cavalry lost many soldiers and were forced to retreat. With most of Cyrus's army intact and the loss of most of the cavalry, Cyrus orders all cavalry and infantry to attack what remained of the forces. Most of the infantry soon surrendered, but Croesus and a small part of the infantry retreated and headed for the capital of Sardis, thus a decisive victory for Persia. So completely fucking smashed, just slaughtered. So
And
yeah,
it seems like from some of the stories you're telling me, when he smashes these armies, they don't ever suspect him to be as dangerous as he is.
right. They,
Like a lot of times, they just like underestimate him and do dumb decisions, make dumb decisions.
don't ever underestimate your opponent. Don't. History is scattered with dead bodies of people who did. Don't ever do that. I know this. I'm over 2,000 years
Absolutely.
too late, but throughout history, how many empires crumbled because just forces were like even the Civil War. The beginning of the Civil War, the Union's like, we're going to defeat the rebels in 2 months. That's not the case. Like the first major battle of the Civil War, the Battle of Bull Run, you had people coming from Washington, D.C. to eat lunch and watch the battle because they thought it was going to be easy victory.
That's Civil War.
And that is right. So these people are eating sandwiches.
Like, that's so insane.
So eating sandwiches or whatever the fuck was considered a picnic meal back in 1861, and they just saw Union forces get slaughtered.
That'll ruin a date, man. That'll definitely ruin a date.
Oh, yes, dear. Pass me more cheese. Oh, what's that? Our son just got slaughtered in battle? We need to go. All right, the last one. We are going to talk about the Siege of Sardis. This is the last decisive conflict at the Battle of Thymbra, which was fought between, of course, Croesus and Cyrus. After the defeat, Cyrus followed the defeated army back to how am I burping off of water? Croesus to a city. He laid siege to the city for 14 days, then captured it. So the Croesus was still confident in his chances because Sardis was well fortified city consecrated by ancient prophecies to never be captured. Additionally, he had sent for immediate aid from Sparta, the strongest state in Greece, and his firm ally, and he hoped to enlist the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and others in his coalition against Persia as well. In fact, however, the Spartans were then occupied in a war with Persia. Go ahead.
Any normal person knows ancient prophecies betray you. Like, come on. That's a rookie mistake.
Well, like the Japanese, Tarawa, they said it would take 1,000 years to conquer Tara. The Marine Corps did it in 3 days. Yeah, baby.
Jesus. Well, that's the shameless plug for the Marines, eh?
Hey, man, lineage. I don't boast about it a lot, but you got to be proud of, the people that came before you.
He said it would take 1,000 years. He did it in 3 days. That's, they got to fire whoever estimated that. He was really off.
Right? Oh, you were off
Like
by.
if it took like 950 years, I'd be like, okay, he was close enough. Hell, if it took 100 years, I'd be like, well, he added a wrong zero. But it took 3 fucking days. What did you think was attacking you, children?
It's not like they hadn't been in battle with the Marines before.
It'll take these kindergartens 1,000 years to make it through here.
So Cyrus, meanwhile, stimulated his troops by the offer of large rewards to the first soldiers who should ascend the battlement, but repeated Persian attacks were repulsed with loss. According to Herodotus, the city ultimately fell by the agency of Persian soldier who climbed up a section of the walls which was neither adequately garrisoned nor protected by the ancient rites which had dedicated the rest of the city's defenses to impregnability. The steepness of the adjoining ground outside the walls was responsible for... What was that?
I have a fun fact, Dan.
Yeah.
I actually looked into this, and the soldier that climbed the wall was named Peter Parkercus.
Oh, yeah.
Fun fact for you.
Spider-Manicus?
That was he was known by that at times.
So obviously the city fell.
Imagine J. Jonah Jameson talking to the orator saying, I want stories of Spider-Man. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Back to the story. This is me fucking laughing.
So they overthrow the city. We already talked about the aftermath in part 2. Croesus became actually a pretty good friend to Cyrus, even though ultimately led to Cyrus's death. That's really a lot of the battles. I just really quick, I Googled this really quick.
He was playing the long game.
This is the only guy whose name we mentioned continuously along Cyrus's. Herodotus, ancient Greek, lived between 484 to 425 BC. He was an ancient Greek historian who was born in Halicarnassus in the Persian Empire, modern-day Turkey. He is known for having written the book The Histories, a detailed record of his inquiry on the origins of the Greco-Persian Wars. He is widely considered to have been the first writer to have treated historical subjects using a method of systematic investigation, specifically by collecting his materials and then critically arranging them in a historiographic narrative. On account of this, he is often referred to as the father of history, a title first conferred on him by the 1st century BC Roman orator Cicero.
That's a big title.
Yes. Okay.
Father of history.
So now let's talk back to Cyrus. We're going to cover his burial, his legacy, and then we're going to wrap this motherfucker up with a pretty little bow and call it done. Whoop, whoop. Cyrus the Great's remains may have been interred in the capital city of Pasargadae, where today a limestone tomb built around 540-530 BC still exists, which many to believe is his. Strabo and Arrian give nearly identical descriptions of the tomb based on the eyewitnesses' reports, who at the request of Alexander the Great visited the tomb twice. Though the city itself is now in ruins, the burial place of Cyrus the Great has remained largely intact, and the tomb has been partially restored to counter its natural deterioration over the centuries. According to legend, his epitaph read, O man, whoever you are and wherever you come from, for I know you will come. I am Cyrus, who won the Persians their empire. Do not therefore begrudge me this bit of earth that covers my bones. Cuneiform evidence from Babylon proves that Cyrus died around December 530 BC, and his son Cambyses had become king. Cambyses continued his father's policy of expansion, captured Egypt for the empire, but soon died after only 7 years of rule. He was succeeded by Cyrus's other son, Bardia, or an impostor posing as Bardia, who became the sole ruler of Persia for several months until he was killed by Darius the Great. Ancient Roman and Greek
People are starting to die faster and faster.
Ancient Roman and Greek accounts give a vivid description of the tomb, both geometrically and aesthetically. The tomb's geometric shape has changed a little over the years, still remaining a large storage quadrangular form at the base, followed by a pyramidal succession of smaller rectangular stones, until after a few slabs, the structure is curtailed by edifice, which an arch roof composed of a pyramidal-shaped stone and a small opening or window on the side where the slenderest man could barely squeeze through. Within this edifice was a golden coffin resting on a table with golden supports, inside of which the body of the Cyrus was interred. Upon his resting place was a covering of tapestries and drapes made from the best available Babylonian materials, utilizing fine Median workmanship. Below his bed was a fine red carpet covering the narrow rectangular area of his tomb. Years later, in the chaos created by Alexander the Great's invasion of Persia, and after the defeat of Darius III, Cyrus the Great's tomb was broken into and most of its luxuries were looted. When Alexander reached his term, he was horrified by the manner in which the tomb was treated and questioned the Magi and put them to court. Alexander's decision to put the Magi on trial was more about his attempt to undermine their influence and his show of power in his newly conquered empire than a concern for Cyrus's tomb. However, it is said that Alexander admired Cyrus from an early age, reading Xenophon's account, which described Cyrus's heroism in battle and governance as king and legislator. Regardless, Alexander the Great ordered Aristobulus to improve the tomb's condition and restore its interior. So respect shown where respect is given. I mean, that speaks volumes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
His respect was widely known then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, conclusion. Cyrus is said to have been upward of 70 years old when he died. By the time of his death, Cyrus controlled more land, more people than anyone before him. Under his dominion were countless principalities, nationalities, ethnicities, and regions of all kinds. But what made Cyrus so great was not the fact that he lorded it over this diverse empire. His greatness is often cited in his enlightenment, sense of tolerance. His tolerance was not merely empty talk. It was set down within the legal code of the Achaemenid Empire. This fact was verified within the discovery of the so-called Cyrus cylinder in the late 19th century. The cylinder itself is not too impressive. It's just an old piece of worn-out clay, but the cuneiform writing that covers the object is very interesting. In ancient Akkadian lettering, Cyrus explains his intention not to be an imperial dictator ruling the masses, but a benevolent leader doing his utmost to protect the diverse citizens of the Persian Empire. Some even go so far as to describe the Cyrus cylinder as the first charter of human rights. Most world readers before him and after Cyrus were rather narrow-minded in comparison. The Romans were tolerant of diversity to an extent, but at the end of the day, when in Rome, you were expected to do as the Romans do. Cyrus saw it differently. His empire was a patchwork of people, with none of the patches greater or lesser than the rest. It is for this reason, as great as his temporal conquests may have been, the benevolence of Cyrus the Great's leadership stands as his greatest attribute of all. That's it.
Very nicely put. Very nicely put. That's very nice.
That's Cyrus the Great. Did you learn?
Yeah, I did. Cyrus the Great was progressive as fuck.
He set the tone for the rest of the world.
It's weird to say this, but he was one of the better world conquerors.
Right. I mean, we even go back to part 1 where we talk about he made his men work, and then he said on the second day he got them drunk and basically said, if you work for me and you're loyal to me, you're going to have the second day more often than you're going to have the first day. But if you cross me, you're going to experience that first day every day.
No, that was impressive. He got people to work for him, but you know what? I liked it. It wasn't empty promises. You know, he treated people with respect and whatnot.
Right. That's how his kingdom was so amicable in terms of like shared leadership and stuff, because it was such a vast empire, but you couldn't send out a tweet to like, hey, King of Sardis, do this for me. You just expected everybody to follow your rule, and for the most part, they did.
That is impressive. He had a hell of a life, lived to 70 and everything. I'll say he was very impressive, man.
So next week we're going to talk about somebody not or just as impressive, but not as merciful as Cyrus the Great.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Some would say ruthless and bloodthirsty.
Next week we are going to talk about one of the most notorious mobsters of all time.
Oh boy.
If not the most well-known mobster. We're going to talk about Al Capone. We are going to have a very special guest on the podcast, a good friend of mine, good friend of Johnny's. We're going to have now Chicago comic Chris Scriva on to discuss this with us. I am looking forward
Chris
to that. Anything else to add, Johnny?
No, man. Phenomenal story. Dan, you worked your ass off on this one. It was a lot of information. I hope you guys liked it. If you enjoyed what you saw here, give us a like and a subscribe. We're on Spotify. We're on all those other podcast platforms. What in the History? You can follow Dan Brady at DBComedy814 on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at PandaSmith827.
But
it's right there on the bottom for him. We're on Facebook.
I hope you guys enjoyed this story. If you're listening to this on Periscope, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, or podcasts on Spotify, Anchor, Google Cast, or wherever, please like, share, or email us at whatinthehistory814@gmail. Please let us know what you want to hear about. We love obscure history. That's what we're doing here. Talking about the stuff that nobody else talks about. So please, if you like it, let us know. Let us know what we can do in the future. This is a low budget operation, but I love the shit out of it, and I hope you guys too.
I do too.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. Hope you enjoyed.
That's a wrap for part 3, guys. Hope you liked it.